You're sitting alone and you feel that familiar vibration. A text, a call, maybe even an unexpected message on social media after weeks or months of silence. And when you see who it is, your entire nervous system goes haywire. It's them, the person who pulled away, the person who said they needed space, that they weren't ready, that maybe you weren't right for each other. The person who left you questioning your own worth, wondering what you did wrong, replaying every conversation in your mind, searching for the moment you pushed them away. And now, inexplicably, they're back. They want to talk. They miss you. They've been thinking about you. And despite every rational part of your brain screaming at you to stay strong, to protect yourself, to remember the pain, you feel that spark of hope reignite. You feel it because part of you has been waiting for exactly this moment, even though you hate yourself for it. This is the dance you know intimately. This is the pattern that has likely brought you to this video. You're an empath, or someone highly attuned to others' emotions, and you found yourself entangled with someone avoidantly attached. And what you're experiencing, this cyclical return, this confusing push and pull dynamic, is not random. It's not because you're broken, or too forgiving, or too loving. It's not a sign that you should keep taking them back, or that your love will eventually fix them. It's something far more explicable, far more rooted in psychological attachment patterns and the specific chemistry that forms between two opposing nervous system responses to intimacy. Today, we're going to explore the deep mechanics of why avoidants come back, what it means for them when they do, and most importantly, what it needs to mean for you if you're going to move forward and protect your own emotional well-being. The attachment blueprint. They inherited to understand why avoidants come back. We have to first understand what made them avoidant in the first place. And this is where attachment theory becomes crucial. Your nervous system, your ability to feel safe with intimacy, to reach out to others, to believe you're worthy of connection, was largely shaped in your earliest relationships, typically with your primary caregivers. If you experience consistent attunement, emotional responsiveness, and safety, you likely developed what's called secure attachment. You learned that relationships are safe, that your needs matter, and that vulnerability is manageable. But the avoidant person you're dealing with grew up in a different emotional environment entirely. In their childhood, there were likely several dynamics at play. Perhaps their caregivers were emotionally distant or dismissive of their feelings. Maybe they received the message that emotions were weakness, that independence was the only reliable strength, that needing others would result in disappointment or rejection. Some avoidants grew up in highly critical environments where their vulnerability was met with judgment rather than compassion. Others had parents who were physically or emotionally unavailable, leaving them to learn very early that if they wanted to survive emotionally, they had to rely only on themselves. What this creates is a deeply ingrained belief system. Closeness equals pain. Intimacy equals loss of control. Letting someone in means risk, and risk is the enemy. So the avoidant person develops defense mechanisms, sophisticated psychological structures designed to keep them safe from the very thing they actually crave: deep, consistent connection. These defenses are not conscious choices they make every morning. These are neural pathways carved over decades, automatic responses that activate the moment someone gets too close, the moment the relationship starts to feel too real, too dependent, too intimate. Here's something important to understand. Many avoidants don't actually recognize themselves as avoidant. They might describe themselves as independent, realistic, or pragmatic. They might frame their fear of intimacy as wisdom about relationships. They've seen people get hurt. They understand the dangers of depending on others. They're protecting themselves from inevitable disappointment. What looks like emotional intelligence to them is actually emotional protection. And because their defense mechanisms have been so effective for so long, they've never had to question whether there might be another way. When you, as an empath, come into their life, something happens that hasn't happened to them in a long time. You see them, not the walls they put up, not the curated version they present to the world, but the real person underneath. You attune to their emotional state. You offer patience when they're withdrawn. You try to understand their pain. You mirror back to them the possibility that they might be worthy of love exactly as they are. This is your natural way of being in relationship. This is your superpower. But to the avoidant, your empathy and your depth of connection are profoundly destabilizing. They begin to feel the pull of genuine intimacy, the terrifying possibility that maybe they could let someone in. And that's when the avoidant nervous system, the one that was programmed decades ago to protect them, activates its emergency response. The walls go up, the distance increases. Suddenly you're too much or needy or too intense. Suddenly they need space. They pull away. And they do this not because they don't care about you, but because your love is triggering the deepest trauma of their attachment system. The architecture of avoidant withdrawal. When an avoidant person begins to withdraw, they're not executing a conscious strategy to hurt you or manipulate you. What's happening is far more automatic and biological. Their nervous system has triggered what's called the deactivating strategy, a protective mechanism that essentially says, this is too close, too vulnerable, too real. I need to regain control. And the way they regain control is by creating distance. This withdrawal takes several forms. There's the cold withdrawal, where they simply disappear. Fewer messages, shorter responses, missed calls. There's the intellectual withdrawal, where they suddenly become very rational and logical, explaining all the reasons why the relationship isn't working, why you're incompatible, why it's better for both of you if you stop. There's the comparative withdrawal, where they suddenly start pointing out flaws in you that they previously overlooked, or comparing you to exes or other potential partners. And there's the existential withdrawal, where they begin philosophizing about their own inability to commit, their fear of intimacy, their deep need for independence, making it seem like the problem is so inherent to who they are that there's nothing to be done about it. What makes this withdrawal particularly devastating for you as an empath is that it directly contradicts everything you're experiencing in the relationship. You're feeling more connected. You're beginning to imagine a future together. You're lowering your walls because the person across from you seemed to be lowering theirs. And then suddenly, without warning or adequate explanation, everything shifts. The warmth becomes coldness. The reciprocity becomes one-sidedness. The promise becomes ambiguity. And you're left not only processing the loss of their presence, but also processing the disorientation of not understanding why. Your empathic response in this moment is to try to figure it out, to solve it, to fix it. You analyze the conversations. You look for where you went wrong. You wonder if you were too vulnerable, too quickly. You consider that maybe they're right. Maybe you are too intense. You start to shrink yourself, to take up less space, to become more palatable. You convince yourself that if you can just become the right version of yourself, they'll come back. And this is exactly the moment when the avoidant person sees confirmation that their deactivating strategy is working. Distance has created the space they were craving. The relationship has become less threatening because you've stopped fully showing up as yourself. The pressure they felt to be intimate has decreased. But here's the paradox, the beautiful and terrible paradox that explains why they always come back. Within avoidant attachment is a constant, unresolved hunger for exactly what they're running from. The avoidant person cannot sustain deep connection, but they also cannot sustain complete independence. They create distance to feel safe, but that distance creates a painful void. They convince themselves they don't need anyone, but their emotional system still craves the experience of being understood, of mattering to someone else, of being loved unconditionally. The vacuum they cannot bear. When the avoidant person successfully creates the distance they needed, something unexpected happens. The withdrawal that felt like relief slowly transforms into emptiness. They can focus on themselves again, on their work, on their independence. They can breathe without the vulnerability that intimacy demanded. But beneath that apparent contentment is a growing awareness of profound loneliness. They find themselves in situations that remind them of you. A song plays that you both liked. They see something they think you'd find funny. They have an achievement, and their first instinct, before they suppress it, is to want to tell you. This loneliness is particular and painful in a way they didn't anticipate. It's not general loneliness. It's the specific absence of you. And because they've never learned to sit with their own emotional experience, to process their feelings directly, they begin unconsciously looking for ways to fill the void. They might throw themselves into work or dating or hobbies, trying to distract themselves from the quiet moments when you're not there, but your absence is deafening. They might find themselves scrolling through your social media, following the trajectory of your life without you. They might notice that other people aren't as easy to be with, that conversations feel flatter, that the sense of being genuinely seen and accepted that you offered is absent. This is when the avoidant begins the process of rationalizing their departure. They start telling themselves a revised narrative. Maybe the relationship wasn't so bad. Maybe they were too harsh. Maybe they miss aspects of it. Maybe you're actually someone special, someone worth considering. The pain of missing you, combined with the time that has passed, slowly softens the edges of the negative narrative they constructed to justify the withdrawal. They don't feel as threatened anymore because the distance has indeed created the safety they needed. Additionally, and this is crucial, the avoidant person is no longer receiving the confirmation of your desperate attempts to fix things, to win them back, to prove your worth. If you engaged in this behavior immediately after they pulled away, reaching out, trying to talk about the relationship, expressing your hurt and confusion, the avoidant would have interpreted this as the relationship becoming too suffocating again, confirmation that you are indeed too much. But after weeks or months of distance, if you've finally given up and started moving on, something shifts in their perception. You're no longer pursuing, you're no longer available, and suddenly you become desirable again. This is a fundamental truth about avoidant attachment that you need to understand. Avoidants are often attracted to unavailability and repelled by availability. When you're desperately seeking connection with them, you confirm their belief that people are needy and that closeness is suffocating. But when you finally accept the loss and move away, they suddenly see something they find attractive. Someone with boundaries, someone with self-respect, someone who isn't willing to sacrifice themselves for the relationship. The biology of this is worth noting. The avoidant person spends the withdrawal period recovering from what felt like emotional overwhelm. Their nervous system downregulates. The threat decreases. And as the threat decreases, other parts of their attachment system activate. They remember the good feelings they had with you. They remember how safe you made them feel, even if it frightened them. They remember being truly seen and accepted. These memories are not fabricated or manipulative in intent. They're real, and they're increasingly difficult to ignore. The return and what it means. When the avoidant person finally reaches out, when they traverse the distance they've created to say they've been thinking about you, there are several things happening simultaneously. On one level, they're responding to genuine loneliness and genuine affection. Some part of them truly has missed you, truly does feel a connection to you. They're not entirely lying when they say they were wrong when they say they've been thinking about you, when they say they want to try again. But there's another level operating as well, and this is where you need to be clear-eyed. The avoidant is reaching out because the conditions are now right for connection as they understand it. There's been sufficient distance. You've hopefully moved on enough that you're not suffocating them with desperation. The relationship has been reimagined in their mind as safe again, at least for now. They want to reconnect without the pressure, without the emotional intensity, without having to move at the pace that true intimacy would require. What they're often not prepared for is that you may have healed. You may have gained clarity about what you deserve. You may have started to understand your own patterns of accepting crumbs, of tolerating unavailability, of hoping love alone could fix someone. The avoidant assumes that your pain will have made you more accepting, more willing to meet them where they are, more grateful for whatever scraps of attention they're willing to offer. What they sometimes find instead is that you've developed boundaries. But here's where you need to be brutally honest with yourself. When that avoidant person comes back, what are you feeling? Are you feeling the rush of validation that they couldn't stay away? Are you feeling the relief that the loss you've been processing can finally be reversed? Are you feeling the hope that maybe this time will be different, that maybe the distance has actually changed something fundamental in them? These are human feelings. These are not weakness, but they are dangerous if they override your wisdom about what this person has already shown you they're capable of providing. The avoidance return is not evidence that they've done deep psychological work. It's not evidence that they've suddenly become secure and ready for the kind of relationship you need. It's evidence that they've felt lonely enough to reach out, brave enough to risk rejection one more time, and nostalgic enough to forget the reasons why the relationship couldn't work as it was. This is not nothing, but it's also not the transformation you've been hoping for. The pattern and why it repeats. If you take the avoidant back, if you allow yourself to hope that this time will be different, the pattern will likely repeat, not because either of you are intentionally cruel, but because the underlying attachment structures haven't changed. The avoidant person will be warm for a time. They'll be present and attentive, and it will feel like they're finally meeting you halfway. You'll feel the relief of reconnection, the sweetness of being chosen. You'll start to imagine that they really have changed, that the pain served a purpose, that you're finally going to have the relationship you always wanted. But as the relationship deepens again, as the emotional intimacy increases, as you begin to believe in the possibility of true partnership, the avoidant nervous system will activate again. The walls will go up, not because they don't care, but because the closeness that you find nourishing feels threatening to them. The vulnerability that you experience as bonding feels suffocating to them. The expectations that they're sensing, whether stated or not, will feel like pressure, and they'll withdraw again. And you'll be back in the space you were before, searching for where you went wrong, wondering what you did to push them away, trying to figure out what version of yourself they'd prefer. This cycle is not unique to you, even though it feels uniquely painful. This is the dance between avoidant and anxious attachment, and it repeats with terrible predictability. The anxious person, when faced with distance, moves closer. The avoidant person, when faced with closeness, moves away, and they reinforce each other's worst fears. The anxious person's pursuit confirms the avoidant's belief that intimacy is suffocating. The avoidant's withdrawal confirms the anxious person's belief that they're not enough, that their love isn't sufficient, that they need to try harder. Understanding this pattern is not about blaming either of you. The avoidant person is not a villain. They're someone whose early experiences taught them that closeness equals pain, and they're living out those lessons even though those lessons no longer serve them. But understanding the pattern is about recognizing that you cannot single-handedly break it. Their healing is not your responsibility. Their willingness to grow towards secure attachment is their work, not yours. And your worth is not dependent on whether they ever do that work. The role of your empathy in their return, there's something specific about why the avoidant person comes back to you, and it has everything to do with what you offer them emotionally. As an empath, you have an extraordinary capacity to see people clearly, to understand their pain, to validate their experience, to offer acceptance even when they're not offering their best self. This is a beautiful quality, and it's also a quality that enables avoidant behavior. When you're with an avoidant person, you accept their withdrawal because you understand the fear underneath it. You don't take it personally as easily as others might because you can feel their anxiety, their conflict, their internal struggle. You forgive the coldness because you sense the warmth they're suppressing. You make space for their inability to show up emotionally because you understand that it's not about you. This compassion is part of why they come back to you specifically. You're someone who gets it. You're someone who won't demand that they be different. You're someone who makes space for their dysfunction and calls it understanding. But here's what you need to see clearly. Making space for someone's dysfunction is not the same as loving them. Accepting someone's unavailability is not the same as being in a healthy relationship with them. Understanding the wounds that drive their behavior is not the same as signing up to be hurt by those wounds repeatedly. Your empathy is your gift, but it can become a liability if it keeps you in situations that diminish you. The avoidant person comes back to you because you're safe in a different way than they expected. They thought intimacy had to mean suffocation. But you offered a version of connection where they could be withdrawn and still be accepted, where they could pull away and you'd wait, where they could withhold emotional availability and you'd fill the gap by offering more of yourself. This is not healthy interdependence. This is a caretaking dynamic, and it serves the avoidant person's need to maintain control far more than it serves your need for genuine partnership. The unspoken qualities that draw them back. There's a specific emotional texture to what you offer that makes you uniquely magnetic to avoidant people, and it's worth understanding in detail. Your empathy creates what feels to them like a pressure-free zone. Unlike people who make demands of them, who ask for reciprocity, who expect emotional presence as a baseline, you seem to accept them as they are. You see their stone walls, and you don't interpret them as rejection. You interpret them as injury. This reframing is deeply comforting to the avoidant person because it means they don't have to change, don't have to perform, don't have to become someone they're not in order to be loved. Beyond that, you offer something they've rarely experienced, patient understanding. When they're cold, you wait. When they're distant, you don't punish them with distance of your own. You search for ways to understand what might be driving their behavior. When they say cutting things, you consider the pain behind the words. This is your gift, but it's also the exact thing that allows them to avoid accountability for their impact on you. Because every time they hurt you, there's an explanation that makes sense, a wound that justifies the wound they inflicted on you. There's also something about your emotional availability that serves their needs in ways you might not fully recognize. They can share vulnerable things with you, but only when they feel safe doing so, only when the vulnerability doesn't require reciprocal vulnerability. You create space for their feelings while they hold back their feelings. You offer attunement while they maintain distance. And this asymmetry feels safe to them because they get the emotional benefits of closeness without the risk of true intimacy. When they come back, they're often coming back to this specific experience. The experience of being loved without being known, of being accepted without being required to accept in return, of being understood without having to understand. And the tragedy of this is that what they're seeking is a contradiction. Real love requires real vulnerability on both sides. Real acceptance requires real reciprocity, and by offering them the illusion of closeness without these requirements, you're actually preventing them from ever having to confront what's really missing in their life. The avoidance internal monologue. To truly understand why they come back, it helps to imagine what's actually happening inside their mind during the period of withdrawal and the moments leading up to their return. In the immediate aftermath of withdrawing, there's often relief mixed with anxiety. They've created the distance they needed, but they're also aware, on some level, that they've hurt you. If they have any conscience at all, and most do, there's a low-level discomfort they're trying not to feel. As the weeks pass, the internal monologue might sound something like this. I did the right thing. We were getting too serious. They were trying to trap me into something I wasn't ready for. I need to focus on myself. I'm fine being alone. This is better for both of us. But underneath this rational narrative is a growing emptiness that they can't quite explain. They're busier, more focused on work or hobbies, more engaged with the world, and yet something feels off. There's a quality to their days that's flat. They're not depressed, exactly, but they're not fulfilled either. They're going through the motions of a life that should feel good, but doesn't quite. Then comes a trigger. Maybe it's a song you both loved. Maybe it's running into a mutual friend who asks how you're doing. Maybe it's late at night when they're alone with their thoughts, and suddenly they're remembering specific moments, the way you laughed at something they said, the way you made them feel seen, the ease of being with you. And the memory is bittersweet because they've been telling themselves the relationship was suffocating, but the memory suggests something different. The memory suggests that maybe it was actually good and they overreacted. In this moment, there's often a subtle shift. The narrative begins to change. Instead of, I had to leave because they were too much, it becomes, maybe I was too quick to judge. Maybe I was scared. Maybe they weren't actually as needy as I thought. The blame starts to move from external, your behavior, to internal, their fear, which is actually a healthier place. But here's the thing. They're not usually doing this consciously. It's not a deliberate process of recognizing their attachment wounds and deciding to work on them. It's more like their nervous system is finally calm enough to remember that there was good there, that the threat they felt wasn't quite as dangerous as it seemed in the moment. So they reach out, and the reaching out is often tentative, testing the waters. Hey, it's been a while. I was thinking about you. I saw something that reminded me of you. These messages are actually a huge vulnerability for the avoidant person, even though they might seem casual. They're risking rejection. They're risking discovering that you've moved on, that you don't think of them anymore, that you've decided you're better off without them. And in reaching out, they're also activating their deepest fear, that they'll reconnect with you. Things will start to feel close again, and they'll have to choose between that closeness and their independence all over again. When you break the cycle with grace, there's a path forward that doesn't require you to stay or to keep cycling with them. It's the path of breaking the pattern not through anger or rejection, but through clarity and self-love. This looks different from person to person, but the core elements are the same. First, it requires you to see the pattern clearly without shame. You're not weak for having gotten caught in this dance. You're not unlovable because you attracted someone avoidant. You have qualities that made you attractive to them. Your empathy, your capacity for unconditional acceptance, your ability to see potential in people. The question is not whether these are good qualities. It's whether you're going to offer them to someone who can't reciprocate them, or whether you're going to save them for someone who will. Second, it requires you to make a different choice when they come back. And this doesn't necessarily mean you have to be harsh or rejecting. You might have a conversation. You might say something like, I care about you, and that's why I need to be honest with you. When we've gotten close before, you've withdrawn. And when you withdraw, I'm left in a lot of pain, trying to figure out what I did wrong. I deserve to be with someone who stays, and you deserve to be with someone whose needs don't trigger you. I don't think that's us. This is a statement made from clarity, not from anger or desperation. Third, it requires you to grieve what this relationship represented to you, but also to recognize what it taught you. You might grieve the version of them that could have shown up if they'd been willing. You might grieve the future you imagined, but you'll also recognize that this experience has clarified exactly what you need and deserve. Finally, it requires you to redirect the same devoted attention you've offered them toward yourself, the same patience, the same compassion, the same unconditional acceptance you've offered the avoidant person is now offered to yourself. You start to heal your own attachment wounds. You start to understand where your anxiety comes from, what makes you attractive to unavailable people, what wounds you've been trying to heal through their love. And as you do this work, something remarkable happens. You become genuinely less attractive to avoidant people, not because you're less lovable, but because you're no longer willing to participate in the dance. The moment of choice. There will be a moment when the avoidant person reaches out and you'll have a choice to make. Not the choice of whether to answer their text or take their call. By that point, the draw is so strong that choice might feel like an illusion. But the choice of whether you can accept the version of relationship they're actually capable of offering, or whether you need something more. Some of you might find that the answer is yes, that you can accept a relationship with someone who's avoidantly attached, that you can have boundaries and still love them, that you don't need them to be secure for the relationship to work. And that might be true for you. Not all empaths need to leave all avoidance, but what you cannot do is go into the relationship expecting them to change, expecting your love to heal their attachment wounds, expecting that this time will be different without them doing any real work. If you choose to stay, if you choose to continue with this person, you need to do it with full clarity about what you're choosing. You're choosing to be with someone who may never be able to offer the kind of emotional presence you desire. You're choosing to manage your own emotional needs separately from the relationship because they won't be managed within it. You're choosing to maintain strong boundaries and friendships and fulfillment outside the relationship because the relationship won't provide everything. You're choosing to love them without requiring them to change. And you're choosing to get out if the pattern becomes harmful to your own mental health. But if you need more than they're capable of giving, if you need consistency and emotional availability and someone who pursues you as much as you pursue them, then you need to choose something different. And this is where the real courage comes in, the path forward. Walking away from an avoidant person, especially when they've come back, is one of the hardest things you'll ever do, because you'll feel like you're abandoning them. You'll feel like you're giving up on the relationship. You'll feel like if you just loved them more, or understood them more deeply, or were patient enough, they'd transform. But this is where you need to separate what's true about them from what's true about your responsibility to them. It's true that they're likely in pain. It's true that their avoidance is rooted in deep wounds. It's true that they're probably doing the best they can with the emotional tools they have. All of that can be true, and it can also be true that you need to walk away. You can have compassion for someone's pain without absorbing their pain into your own life. You can understand their limitations without shrinking yourself to fit within them. Walking away also means grieving. You'll grieve the relationship that was, but more importantly, you'll grieve the relationship that might have been. You'll grieve the version of them that you saw potential in, the version that was capable of deep connection, the version that might have been there if they'd been willing to do the work. That grief is real and valid and necessary. Let yourself feel it. Don't bypass it by jumping into another relationship or convincing yourself that the relationship wasn't important. It was important. They were important. And they're still not the right person for you. As you move forward, the real work isn't about getting over them. It's about understanding yourself. What is it about your own attachment style that draws you to people who are unavailable? What wounds of your own are you trying to heal through your ability to love people unconditionally? Were you taught as a child that your worth was dependent on your ability to manage other people's emotions, to take care of others, to make things work? These are the questions that will set you free, because understanding your own attachment patterns will allow you to choose differently in the future. You might discover that you're anxiously attached, that you learned early that love was conditional on pleasing others, that your worth was tied to your usefulness in relationships. You might discover that you come from a family system where emotional attunement was your survival skill, and now that skill has become a liability. You might discover that you're attracted to people who are projects, who have potential, who you believe you can understand in ways no one else can. These patterns aren't character flaws. They're survival mechanisms that once served you and now are limiting you. The real gift they gave you. Here's something that might feel impossible to consider right now. The avoidant person in your life, the one who pulled away and came back and broke your heart, they've actually given you an incredible gift. They've shown you exactly where your boundaries are missing. They've shown you exactly how much you'll compromise yourself for connection. They've shown you the depth of your capacity for love and acceptance, which is extraordinary. And they've shown you that your love, no matter how genuine and pure and well-intentioned, cannot heal someone who isn't willing to heal themselves. This is not a failure on your part. This is wisdom. This is the knowledge that will protect you moving forward. You now know that you cannot love someone into secure attachment. You now know that acceptance of someone's dysfunction is not the same as healthy relationship. You now know that understanding someone's pain does not obligate you to stay in a relationship with them. You now know that you deserve to be with someone who's not just capable of loving you, but who's actually willing to show up and do it consistently. The avoidant, as a mirror. In some ways, the avoidant person serves as a mirror for your own emotional capacity. They show you how much you can give. They show you how long you can wait. They show you how deeply you can care for someone despite their inability to reciprocate. And while these qualities are beautiful, they're not an indication that you should stay in a relationship that depletes you. They're an indication that you have a tremendous amount of love to give, and the question becomes, who deserves that love? Who is actually going to appreciate it and reciprocate it and build something beautiful with you? The answer is not someone avoidantly attached who comes and goes based on their own internal temperature. The answer is someone secure, someone who's done enough work on themselves to be genuinely available, someone who sees your empathy as a gift rather than an opportunity to keep you off balance. And yes, such people exist. They exist precisely because they've done the work that the avoidant person in your life may still not be willing to do. The cycle ends with you. One of the most important truths you need to hear is this: the cycle of the avoidant coming back and you taking them back ends, not when they change, but when you do. It ends when you stop waiting. It ends when you stop hoping that this time will be different. It ends when you decide that you're worth more than breadcrumbs. It ends when you get so clear about what you need from a relationship that you can no longer accept less. This doesn't mean you have to hate them. It doesn't mean you have to pretend the relationship didn't matter. It doesn't mean you have to vilify them or construct a narrative where they were always terrible and you were always right. It means you have to reach a place of radical acceptance where you accept that they are who they are. They've shown you what they're capable of, and that has to be enough information for you to make a decision about your own life. When they come back next time, and if the pattern hasn't been broken, they likely will. You'll have a choice. And that choice will be informed by your own commitment to your own well-being. Maybe you'll choose to have a conversation. Maybe you'll choose to tell them no. Maybe you'll choose to maintain friendly contact without rekindling the romance. Whatever you choose, it will be your choice, made from a place of strength rather than from a place of fear or hope. The real love story isn't about winning them back or being chosen by them. The real love story is about you choosing yourself. It's about you realizing that your empathy, your capacity for understanding, your depth of feeling, these are not flaws that need to be hidden or minimized. These are extraordinary qualities that deserve to be matched with someone who has done their own work, someone who's capable of reciprocity, someone who won't take advantage of your generosity. You have spent so much energy trying to understand them, trying to make space for their limitations, trying to be the person they needed. What if you redirected that same energy toward understanding yourself? What if you became as devoted to your own healing as you've been devoted to theirs? What if you brought the same compassion and patience and deep understanding toward your own wounds that you've offered them? This is not about being selfish. This is about recognizing that you cannot pour from an empty cup. And more importantly, it's about recognizing that the person you're going to help the most by being strong and whole and committed to your own healing is yourself. The secondary effect is that you'll be in a position to attract and build relationships with people who are equally committed to their own growth. You'll become someone who's no longer a beacon for unavailable people because you're no longer available to people who can't show up. You become someone who's available only to people who are willing to be equally available to you. The strength in letting go. Letting go of the avoidant person is often framed as loss, as failure, as not loving hard enough. But what it actually is the most profound act of self-love you can perform. It's saying, I love you enough to let you go. I love myself enough to not wait. I love my own life enough to not put it on hold for someone who's ambivalent about being in it. This is the strength that the avoidant person actually responds to. But by the time you've developed this strength, you likely won't want them anymore anyway. And that's the beautiful irony. By the time you stop chasing them, by the time you move on, by the time you decide you deserve better, you've become the person who could probably make it work with them. Because you're no longer desperate. You're no longer trying to prove your worth through your devotion. You're no longer making yourself small to accommodate their comfort. You're standing in your full power. And while that might eventually make you attractive to them again, you won't need them to complete you because you'll have completed yourself. How to prepare for their return. If you're still in contact with this person, if there's any chance they might reach out again, it helps to prepare yourself psychologically for that moment, because preparation changes how you respond. Instead of being blindsided by a text message that derails your entire day, you can approach it from a place of clarity. First, write down exactly what you need from a relationship. Not what you want, not what you hope for, but what you actually need to be healthy and happy. Maybe you need consistent communication. Maybe you need to know where you stand. Maybe you need someone who pursues you as much as you pursue them. Maybe you need emotional availability and presence. Write it down. Make it specific. And then ask yourself, does this person, in their current state, offer these things? Not potentially. Not if they change, but right now, based on what they've already shown you. Second, get clear on your boundaries. What would it look like if you took them back? What would need to be different? What specific behaviors would indicate that they've actually done work on themselves? Be realistic. Real change takes real time and real effort. A few nice messages and some attention is not evidence of change. If you can't articulate what would actually be different, That's useful information too. Third, build a life that doesn't depend on their return. This is the most important part. The more you invest in your own growth, your friendships, your work, your hobbies, your healing, the less power they have over you. When they reach out, you won't be sitting alone waiting. You won't be desperately hoping this is it. You'll be busy becoming who you're meant to be, and if they can fit into that life in a healthy way, great. If they can't, that's fine too. Finally, remember that you can still care about someone and choose not to be in a relationship with them. You can still hope that they find their way and do their work. You can still send them loving energy in your mind from a distance. But you don't have to sacrifice your own well-being to do that. You don't have to wait for them. You don't have to be their emotional holding tank while they figure themselves out. The closing word. If you're watching this, if you're in the space of having just been contacted by an avoidant person, or if you're in the throes of the cycle and wondering if it's ever going to end, I want you to know something. What you're experiencing is real. Your feelings are valid. Your love is real. And your pain is real. And all of that is also not a reason to stay. All of that is just information. It's information that tells you you're capable of deep love and connection. It's information that tells you you're worth showing up for. It's information that tells you that you deserve someone who's as devoted to you as you are to them. The avoidant person comes back because they miss you. They come back because you've offered them something they didn't know they were missing. They come back because you're safe and understood. But they come back to you, not to stay, but to visit. And you deserve someone who stays. You deserve someone who chooses you again and again and again, not because you finally become the right person, but because they've decided that being with you is worth the vulnerability. This is your sign, if you needed it, to stop waiting for them to choose you. Start choosing yourself. Start building a life so full and rich and meaningful that even if they come back, even if they promise it will be different this time, you're too busy becoming who you're meant to be to get caught in the old cycle. That's where the real freedom is. That's where your real power lies. And that's where your real love story, the one with yourself, can finally begin.